we are. This is fantastic. It is your girl, Dr. Mo, Dr. Monique Gary. I am your happy host for BlackDoctor.org's special show that comes on every fourth Saturday of the month, S.O.S. And in case you were wondering, S.O.S. stands for Soul Filling Our Sisters. That's right. Every fourth Saturday, we are here with you, filling your cup with the latest, with the greatest, the information that you need on health and wellness, particularly as it relates to the Black community and to cancer. So, I'm your girl, Dr. Mo. We got an amazing show for you today. We are so grateful to our sponsors. We're grateful to Black Doctor to be here. And we're talking about genetic counseling as a career. But first, when we come back, I want to introduce to you the reason we're here, our CEO of the organization that is sponsoring this programming for you, Touch for Life. You're here on blackdoctor.org. We're talking genetic counseling, a thriving career in STEM. Grab your daughters, grab your sons, grab your coffee, bring your cups, and let's fill them. Stay tuned. Stay with us. Before we talk about careers in genetic counseling, let me first introduce our CEO of Touch for Life. She has started the Black Genes Matter movement, Laura Crandon. Are we able to bring Laura on this morning? While we're waiting, I want to introduce you. This is S.O.S. Soul Filling Our Sisters here every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org. Laura Crandon is the CEO of Touch for Life. She's a metastatic breast cancer thriver, and she is the founder of the Black Genes Matters movement. And it is the reason why we're able to talk today to some genetic counselors and talk about the importance of knowing what's in your genes. Laura, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dr. Mo.
Listen, we're glad to see you. I know we're having a little bit of technical delays, but bear with us because we got some great information for you. And Laura, I want you to just tell people a little bit about your story and your journey and how you arrived at the conclusion that Black genes matters. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it really is starting from my own journey of breast cancer that then metastasized to my brain. How I got access to this great advanced therapy. That's how I'm looking at you and even talking today. And clinical trials I got access to. And I realized that for us, Black people, we don't usually get access to what I got access to. And I just decided that that's not fair, that we shouldn't keep dying. And what's important for us to know is our genetics, whether that comes from knowing your family health history, or frankly, if you don't know your family health history, all the more reason to get genetic testing so you know what you might have inherited, might be at risk for. And then if you have a diagnosis, particularly of cancer, it's really important to get the test to know what's driving your particular cancer. And so I started Black Genes Matter for you, everyone who's watching and listening to this, so that you could know what you are entitled to and what you should advocate for and how you can live longer.
I love that because, we tend to think of genetic counseling and genetic testing as things that only pertain to what runs in the family. And there's a lot of myths. And if you're watching, this is S.O.S. Soul Filling Our Sisters. I want you to put into the chat, give us a myth that you've heard about genetics, about what's in your genes. And I'll start off with one. Oh, cancer skips a generation, right? The breast cancer genes can skip a generation. So we want you to put in the chat, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us some of the myths that you've heard about cancer and genetics, because Laura, you're absolutely right that, when we know what's one in our genes, which is hereditary, but two, the changes that happen in the genes when we have cancer, right? Because that's a different type of a mutation. Those are the things that can help inform treatment. So how did this Black Genes Matters movement arrive? Like, tell us a little bit about the evolution of that, because, we know it's important, but why that title, why that movement, and why now?
It's by us, for us. Right? It's Black Genes Matter. Your Black Genes matter to you and our community, because they do. It's really a strong belief that the answer to cancer is in our genes. That right now, a lot of the research, a lot of the science, and a lot of the drugs are based on genes that have been studied that aren't us. It's 97% Western European. So when the researchers and scientists are looking for why cancer, why you get cancer, or so aggressive, or why it's so deadly, we're not even in the equation. And so I decided that it's really important for us to be in the science, and for us to be considered when research is being done. And Black genes matter because that's really a simple way to say it. They matter, particularly given our, and in the Black diet, given our history. Um, my maternal name is Chen, and so there's a lot of diversity in my family and a lot of diversity in our genes. And so it's really important for us to, it's a movement for us. It's a movement because we have been left out. And I'm kind of tired of it. I really want us to know what's best for us.
Absolutely, Laura. And I love that we have some GC students. GC stands for genetic counseling. We got some students in the chat, folks who are watching. And if you have young people at home, we want you to grab your young people, because if they've always said, oh, I'm interested in science and STEM careers, or I might want to go into medicine, I might want to go into nursing, I'm not really sure, genetic counseling is a career for them. And one of the comments in the chat, we got to get this. It says in a 2016 article, 3,000 study participants, there was a 21% discrepancy between European Americans and African Americans in their genetic testing experience, right? We were less likely to receive BRCA testing for hereditary cancer mutations. So we're going to talk about why that is. We're going to talk about really understanding we want to talk about how to feed your minds, feed your souls with this information about genetic testing and counseling, but we also want to feed your fight. So, Laura, we're going to have a quick break, and I want us to talk about the Feed Your Fight campaign, and then we're going to get to our genetic counselors, and we're going to unveil the counseling profession. So, here we go. Feed Your Fight. Let's hear about it. There it is. You can see it. Black women conquering breast cancer. Laura, we're having a little trouble with your Wi-Fi at this time, okay? But we know that this is a cancer cookbook with recipes from survivors, from thrivers. We've got testimonials, and Sharon Hawks, who is a registered dietitian and nutritionist. She is the author and the collaborator on this book. I was so thrilled to be able to write some comments about the need for this type of book in the community. And so we want you to use the QR code. Go to Touch for Life and register. We want you to support the cookbook, because the proceeds do support Touch for Life and the Black Genes Matters movement. Because you know what? Our Black Genes matter. It is also related to the food that we eat, and we want to fight cancer with nutrition. Food can be medicine, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So, now, I'd really like to bring on our first guest, Tawana St. Louis. Tawana St. Louis is a leading cancer genetic counselor in Dallas, Fort Worth area in Texas. So we're going to bring her on, and I want us to talk a little bit about this career and how she got started.
Hi, everyone.
There she is. Oh, gosh. Tawana, how are you?
I'm doing really well. It's a good day. I'm excited to be on the show today and talk about my story, my journey, and help others if they feel it's helpful for them.
Wow, it's a good day to see you here. This is S.O.S. Soul Filling Our Sisters every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org. Today, we're talking about the unicorns of the cancer world, the genetic counselors. So, Tawana, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us your story. Tell us your why.
Yeah, I'm a lead genetic counselor at Medical City Dallas Hospital. I've been doing it. I graduated from Sarah Lawrence College in 2017, and I really what led me to this field was I was originally pre-med, as many individuals are, and I chatted a couple of doctors, and I was like, this isn't exactly what I want, right? I was very much a fan of. I grew up with very close to my family, family history. Culture. I was a culture anthropology major at the time. And after shadowing, I said I wanted more of a connection with patients, right? And I wanted to bring that family, that cultural background and understanding into whatever I do in healthcare. And so that's what kind of led me into genetic counseling. And I just looked for a role, looked for a position in genetics, and happened to come across a genetic counseling internship in undergrad. And that kind of just took off. And that's where I am today.
Wow. So you looked at it, you studied it, and tell us about Sarah Lawrence College, because I don't know if a lot of people have heard of it, but it's got one of the premier programs in the country, doesn't it?
It does. Sarah Lawrence College was great when I was there. I think I was one of the bigger classes there. I'm sure there was one bigger after me. There were 30 of us. So we're one of the bigger genetic counseling programs. It's in Bronxville, New York. The beauty of that program that I really enjoyed was you're in New York, right? So you've got the diversity of New York. You've got a diverse patient population. It was a great experience. I got to rotate at multiple hospitals when I was there instead of just one hospital. And so I was in Bronx, Lebanon, where I did prenatal. I actually did sessions in Spanish there because I learned Spanish in undergrad. And I was also able to rotate in New Jersey, throughout New York City. It was a great experience. I will never forget it.
That's incredible. And we should back up a little bit, because we got some folks who are watching here and they're wondering, well, what even is a genetic counselor? Like, can you tell us about that as a profession? What does that mean?
Yeah, what is a genetic counselor? Well, we're healthcare professionals that really our goal is to help individuals and patients. Well, I say patients and individuals because not everyone that sees us is affected, right? So help individuals to identify that whether they themselves are at increased risk to develop a condition or disorder based off their own personal and family history. And the beautiful thing about genetic counseling is once you help one patient, right? Once you can help them to identify their risk, understand what that risk means for them. Not only can you just help them identify those risks, you can help them figure out what are next steps to prevent that risk. And you can also help their families, which has always been probably my pride and joy of being a genetic counselor. Is it's not just my patient in front of me, but if I find something that maybe for them in the moment, a mutation that puts them at risk to develop a condition, they're able to take that information if they choose and then share that information with their families, and we can all do what we can to hopefully prevent certain situations or conditions from happening in the future. Or if not, in the cancer realm, at least early detection, targeted therapies. And I should say that genetic counselors are not just in cancer. There are prenatal genetic counselors, cardiogenetic counselors, there are optometry genetic counselors, there are laboratory genetic counselors. We're all everywhere doing our best to help patients identify and understand their risk and hopefully make a difference in their and their families' lives going forward.
Wait a minute, wait. I gotta back it up, because you're telling me that there's counselors for heart, counselors for, did you say optometrists, or for eye disorders, for
Mhm.
every single organ in the body? There are people who can counsel on whether or not it runs in your family, whether or not you're predisposed to get it, whether or not you're at risk of passing it on to your children. Is that what I'm understanding?
You got it.
Wow. Wow, that's deep. So tell me a little bit about kind of what your role is as a lead genetic counselor in your system. What brings you joy on a daily basis, and what do you love about your job?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I love about being in a lead role is I really get to work on growing the program, right? So not just being a genetic counselor, I see patients on a daily basis, but I also am able to help to grow my program and make it bigger, right? So I increase the number of genetic counselors, increase the number of genetic counseling assistants, making sure that individuals that are interviewing and going to work for us are a good fit for our patients. And I get to do undergraduate internships, mentorships, and one of my current genetic counselors was an undergraduate intern, and I get joy from being able to help patients, but also help others to grow in the field of genetics and genetic counseling, and help the hospital to improve, I guess, their services that are available.
That's incredible. And I love that you're in a lead position, because there's some disparities, are there not, in terms of who's becoming a genetic counselor and who's accessing genetic counseling? And can you talk a little bit about some of the racial and ethnic and other disparities, even, geographical disparities that we see in access to and in the profession itself?
Yeah, I can definitely speak on to that. I can speak to that, especially based on experience too. Last I checked, I don't know if this number's gotten better. Is only about 2% of the genetic counseling profession identifies as Black. That could have improved. I think it's been a little under a year since I've last seen it. So there aren't many Black genetic counselors. That is a fact. In terms of access, my experience, unfortunately, a lot of the time, and I'm speaking from experience here, a lot of the times when I have my patients that identify as Black or any other minority group, they're always coming to me, which I always found interesting, before, after cancer is developed, or after someone in their family has been through, has been lost or had a devastating diagnosis. And so I do feel like, to some extent, and I'm always hearing this when I do talks, oh, I never heard about genetic counseling. And I'm like, but you had a diagnosis 10 years ago and you were really young, but no one mentioned this to you. And so I do question whether minority patients are not being told as frequently as other patients about genetic counseling and genetic testing as an option to prevent their future risks and the risk of their families going forward. And another area that I've found is impacted, in my experience, rural settings, right? It's going to be harder for patients in a rural area to come to a genetic counseling session that's in a major city. You're not going to find many genetic counselors in major cities, outside of major cities or in rural areas. And so you can oftentimes find that those patients are disenfranchised as well. And so there are definitely geographical barriers to getting genetic counseling and genetic testing. I think there is a little bit of, minority patients, especially Black patients, not necessarily being told up front that genetic counseling or genetic testing is an option, or not being reminded could be a thing, also be a possibility. And yeah, I think that's pretty much, I think I've covered a good chunk of kind of what kind of barriers there are to care for minority patients and individuals who are interested in doing something about their risk or knowing about their risk before something actually happens.
Wow. So if you're just joining us, this is SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters. Tawana, are you able to hear me?
I am.
Are you able to see me too?
Yes, I am.
All right, fantastic, because mine says I'm in the backstage, I'm in the green room. But if you are in our room, you are getting your cup filled. This is SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters. We're talking about genetic testing, genetic counseling, and genetics as a career. One other thing I think I want to ask you before we go to our next segment is, how does genetic counseling contribute to personalized treatment plans? Because we always thought of it as ways to know your risk, reduce your risk, start screening earlier. But how does it actually contribute if we're talking about, the treatment that people receive?
Yeah, now I'm not a physician, so I don't want to talk specifics on treatment. But what I will say is that there are certain treatments that, when someone is identified to have a gene mutation and they have a diagnosis of cancer, then there are options that are available that become available to them that may be better than their current treatment or management plan. And again, I can't speak to specifics, but what I also can say is the real goal of genetic counseling, what we're hoping, I just came from a whole genetics conference where genetics and cancer conference, where they really said our goal is to identify patients before diagnosis, so we can reduce risk, prevent risk. There's even pills that individuals can take that are listed in National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines, for example, that can reduce their risk to develop cancer as well. So there's a lot of options out there, and the goal is to know that you're at risk before a diagnosis. At least that's what genetic counseling and genetic testing is. And if you find out while you're diagnosed, potentially there are treatments or therapy or plans that will be better, are basically able to target those mutations and aid in healing.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we see in my world. So as a breast cancer surgeon, I'm usually the first touch point for patients to talk about the need for genetic testing when they've gotten a diagnosis of breast cancer. And so from there, and many surgeons around the country, if we have access to genetic counselors and programs, and we can refer our patients there, sometimes we end up doing the counseling ourselves, and there's various trainings for us to learn how to do that. But it is not a complete science, let me tell you. But then we got to talk to people about, what do you do with those results and the information? And how does it inform things like whether or not you have a higher risk of cancer recurrence? Because if you have a mutation, you might have a higher risk of a cancer happening again. And that would change your surgical decision making, right? How do we protect our children? And then how do we get to the therapies that are personalized for us? And I think that is really the hope and the promise of all of, this realm of knowing what's in our genes, is that we can be able to better tailor the therapeutics to what's in our genes and what's happening in the tumors themselves, and target the cancer cells specifically so that the treatments can be hopefully less toxic. And I know that that's something that's an emerging field. And, tell me from your perspective, last question, why do Black genes matter to you? Tell us about why this movement is important.
Why is this movement important? I'm a Black woman. Super important. But also just because, I mean, when it comes to genetics, people don't realize how important diversity is, right? If you are making decisions on what is genetically a problem, you want to make sure that you understand what a risk is in different populations, right? And for a while, within genetics as a science, there was a lack of research done on Black genes, right? Doing genetic testing for Black patients, patients overall. And that's across the board. Even the Human Genome Project, I think, was like 1 or 2%. And don't quote me on that. That could be a wrong number, but there were not many Black patients who were part of that study. And so what ends up happening is you end up with I'll try to keep this short, but ends up happening is when you don't have a diverse data set, then those treatments that can be targeted, you may be missing out on options that are available to different groups. So Black genes do matter. They've mattered before, they matter now, and they matter on a scientific level, and they also matter just on a human level.
Oh my gosh. I absolutely love that. They mattered before, they matter now, they matter for our future. And like Laura said, the answer to cancer is in what? It's in our genes. So I thank you for sharing. We're going to keep you on, and we're going to invite you to chat a little bit more, because we got some folks from Sarah Lawrence coming up. We're going to talk more about careers in genetic counseling. But first, I understand that we got to do a giveaway. We love giving stuff away here. This is SOS Soul Filling Our Sisters, and there are some prizes. It's giveaway time. So let's throw up that QR code. Touch for Life is having a giveaway. The link to win, well, you got to click the QR code. We want you to join the community, become part of Touch for Life. That means you can be an ambassador. That means you can have a Black Genes Matters movement party near you. It means that you can have access to resources for your community, for your church, for your health center, for your family members and your friends, for your sorority, for your fraternity, right? We want us to spread the word that Black Genes Matter. So click the QR code, log in, register for the giveaway. I don't know what they're giving away, but I know it's going to be good. And if you want to know, you got to click the QR code. So we're going to do that. All right. I hope you win. Good luck, everyone. And we're going to keep moving, because this is SOS Soul Filling Our Sisters every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org. And now we got to talk about the education, because people might be watching thinking, well, okay, I'm interested. How do I become a genetic counselor? What programs are out there? So at this time, I really want to bring on Kelly Ackman. And Kelly is the Director of Thought Leadership for the Institute for Genomics Education, Workforce, and Leadership at Sarah Lawrence College.
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you with us? Can you see us?
Yes, I can see you. Can you see me and hear me? Hello, can you hear me? Okay. All is well. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share about this wonderful profession.
Tawana, are you still able to see me?
Yes, we can see you as well. So I'll start, I guess, with a little bit about my journey to genetic counseling. very similar to what Tawana had shared as far as, thinking about what are some of the health careers, that I could go into. I came more from the psychology and counseling side and thought, gosh, instead of doing research, I really was very interested in helping patients. And so my sights were directed into genetics as a really a great biological science. And I began to love genetics, psychology, and just given the connections with family. And so I actually went to the University of Minnesota for my training as an undergraduate and got to shadow and experience some of what a genetic counselor does, and then ended up going to genetic counseling school at the University of Minnesota as well. So I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, but I can talk a little bit about the profession and what type of background academically a person would need in thinking about the training for genetics. A lot of genetic counselors come from a background of, biology, psychology, biochemistry, laboratory science, maybe pursuing, as Tawana had, a career or a thought of going into medical school. And so those types of prerequisites are something that many people think about when they're, kind of introduced to the field of genetic counseling. And there are some challenges and opportunities in training future genetic counselors. I'll also back up the 2% of Black genetic counselors today. It's not enough. When Tawana was talking about her training, I think that frankly there's a huge opportunity to really reach more Black students earlier on in their education. Middle schools, high schools, get people excited about some opportunities in a STEM career, so that we can ensure that we have a greater understanding and a greater diversity of genetic counselors to serve the population at large. We want our population of genetic counselors to mirror the populations that we're aiming to serve.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I think it's so powerful and so important. So talk to us about some of the recruiting and some of the responses that you get when you talk to young people who are like, I never knew this. I never knew this was a career. I bet you get that a lot, don't you?
Yes. Well, and in the general public, a lot of people don't know, what is a genetic counselor? And so they may not have had any experiences with it. A lot of people say, gosh, I was, going into my, undergrad, I was graduating undergrad, maybe I happened upon, this type of field. Some patients have had or some people have had, patient experiences or family experiences that led them, to this career as well. And so I think we really just want to get the word out earlier too, so people can be preparing, and thinking about what are some of the paths that I'll need to take to go, into a master's level program.
And so do you guys do any like recruitment sessions? Do you go to colleges? How do people find out about this before they need a genetic counselor? Question one. And then question two is, who actually needs to see a genetic counselor? So we're going to take question one first, though.
Yes. Well, that is part of what we are aiming to do with the Institute for Genomics Education, Workforce, and Leadership. It's actually a new initiative at Sarah Lawrence College to really get the word out about what are some of the challenges today in delivering genomic medicine, precision medicine. And part of that is really workforce. We don't have enough genetics professionals right now to be in every, hospital, every area. To really ensure that people have that access, right, to the service. And so, going into the high schools, going, to the college career fairs, making sure that people have the information early on, I think is so important and part of, what we really strive to do. For this program and get the word out about the profession, but also, start to solve for some of the challenges of, okay, so now we have genetic counselors, but are there additional, workforces that might be needed to support, patients through the journey to precision medicine?
And is this something that's accessible worldwide? I mean, when you think about sort of I guess the privilege, right, of us being able to access and have genetic counselors, how does this become scalable? What types of global things are happening to teach people how to do this around the world? And I don't know if you know this, it's just something that popped into my mind when I think about having access to someone to go over this. How does this spread to the rest of the world?
That is an awesome question, Dr. Mo, because I think that is really part of the expansion of genetic counseling too in that workforce. So there are programs around the world. A lot of genetic counselors too come to get their training in the U.S. and maybe go back to the country of origin and try to start programs to really ensure that their home country and the people within it have access to this service too. So it is growing. It is a profession, I think, worldwide. I don't know how many worldwide we have, but I know in the US we have almost 6,000 genetic counselors, which, I mean, we have millions of people, in this population. So it's not enough yet, but, I do think that the profession is growing and even worldwide.
So folks are watching who represent HBCUs. They're wondering about recruitment and sort of the strategy. Can you tell us a little bit about how Sarah Lawrence is reaching out to increase diversity in the genetic counseling workforce and in those programs? Are there any pipeline programs or other things that you all do to sort of recruit and retain underrepresented talent?
Yes. Well, I know that part of the Joan H. Marks graduate program in human genetics, which is the genetic counseling school at Sarah Lawrence College, they are one of 5 institutions right now that are part of a scholarship through the Warren Alpert Foundation. And that scholarship or funds essentially is to grant funds to increase diversity in the field. So scholarships are available to students who, meet those requirements in order to be, able to, go on and pursue that academic career after undergraduate work. And some programs are now offered completely online. That's increasing accessibility to, I think right now there are over 55 programs. And also, I think there have been some funds dedicated to grow programs at HBCUs as well. And so I think we're thinking in the genetic counseling community, how can we increase the accessibility of the training to get more people through the door, but also thinking about how can we make it more affordable and make people aware of this career earlier on in their education.
Wow. So did you know? Wow. If you're watching, this is SOS Soul Filling Our Sisters on blackdoctor.org. Did you know that genetic counseling training can be online as well? This is exciting.
There's some exciting, flexible programs, that are really
Wow.
thinking outside the box to say, what can we do to help people stay in their own community while they're, pursuing training in genetic counseling?
That's fantastic. I heard you say there's scholarships available as well. And so it really is about making this accessible for everybody. All right. Now, my big question to you is this: who should see a genetic counselor? Give us some ideas of, for folks who are watching, they may not have cancer, they may have, family. It's like, when does somebody know that it's time to come see one?
That is an awesome question, because I think in this day and age, I would say genetic counseling is for everyone, in some way, shape, or form. Just like Tawana was saying, genetics is everywhere, prenatal genetic counseling, cancer genetic counseling, thinking about what's in your family, looking around, every family has something, that is of, interest medically that they may want to know more information about. And I think for that reason, genetic counseling is for everyone. And so I would say too, there are accessible ways in thinking about genetic counseling, telehealth options, especially, during the pandemic, everyone got used to doing telehealth or calls. And so that is something too that has really increased access for patients who can, meet with a genetic counselor, discuss, what they need to discuss about family history, and make a plan for considering genetic testing, depending on, what might be available. So those conversations, though, I would say genetic counseling really can assist people in making those informed choices about what they might want to know more about, for their health moving forward.
I love that. And so, one more time, just to outline the pathway for people who might be watching and thinking about their college student, who's interested, maybe, they want to expose them to careers. What is the pathway for somebody who is an undergraduate who's thinking about a career in genetic counseling? What should they do? What sites should they visit?
Yes. The National Society of Genetic Counselors has a great site that says, that has a Find My Genetic Counselor. And I would say reach out, to a genetic counselor in your local area. That is a great way to get to know, the field is through, kind of experiencing what that might look like. Maybe reach out to ask if you can shadow them or interview them. Genetic counselors, they are open arms, when it comes to really accepting people's requests, to talk about the profession. I think everyone is very passionate about, what we do, and know, that we want to bring in so many more people to consider, the career of genetic counseling.
I love it. So genetics is for everyone because what's in your genes matters. And we are here talking about Black genes that matter. We're here on SOS Soul Filling Our Sisters every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org. And, Touch for Life has champions also that you can reach out to. And it's hello@touchforlife.org. And that's a way to get connected to a genetic counselor. It's a way to get connected for career resources. We have some also resources in the chat, and we want you to use and utilize this and start your children earlier learning about careers in medicine that might be outside of being a physician or a physician's assistant, but there's a really amazing career path, a rewarding career path, as we've heard from Tawana, in genetic counseling. So do consider it. Learn all about it. And remember that you've got some resources, and Sarah Lawrence College is not new to this. They are true to this, and they have an amazing program that is really disseminating GCs across the country with the best education and just wonderful resources to counsel our community. So I want you to stay on, Kelly. We're going to bring you back on for our panel. But first, I got to bring Laura Crandon back up because we need to talk a little bit about a symposium that's coming up. Survive and Thrive Symposium 2024. Laura, tell us about it.
That's right. This is the second time that Touch for Life is going to be at the symposium. It's for survivors and their families. It's coming up on May 18th. And what's special about this event is that that's where we're going to launch our book that Dr. Mo talked about earlier, Feed Your Fight. There'll be free copies at that event. The author, Sharon Hawks, will be there. And remember that this book actually came from our community. Again, for us, by us. The recipes in this nutrition guide came from survivors, Black survivors, and you'll hear their stories and why certain recipes are important to them and learn about that. So that's coming up on May 18th. It is in the Maryland area, so if you're in there, please do stop by.
Awesome. May 18th, right? Is the Johns Hopkins Breast Cancer Program Survive and Thrive Symposium. We want you to come out, click the QR code, register, and we want you to become a part of the Touch for Life community. This is SOS Soul Filling Our Sisters. We're so glad to have you with us here on blackdoctor.org every fourth Saturday. So, Laura, I want to bring up our whole panel, and I want us to talk a little bit now about some of the myths, some of the challenges, right? Can we talk about, the myths surrounding genetic counseling? And I want you to start. Tell us some of the myths that you've heard on your Black Genes Matters campaign, and then Tawana, maybe you can chime in. And Kelly, if you've heard any sort of myths that need to be debunked, now's a good time. 2 truths and a lie. Let's hit it.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of them is like you have to be a nerdy scientist in order to be a genetic counselor. And that's, of course, these are the experts who can tell you. I mean, you can tell that they come from different backgrounds, so you don't have to do that. And then we've heard that, it's more lab-based versus being in front of human beings, and that's not true. It doesn't have to be. Tawana talked about the different types of things that genetic counselors can do. And so those are a couple of the things that I hear frequently about genetic counselors. I don't know what you guys have heard.
Tawana, you're on mute. I'm going to have you bring yourself off. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some of the myths that I think I've heard as well. Or one thing they'll be like, genetic counselors always wear cardigans. I mean, that's kind of true, but it brings people in. Um, but I definitely would say you do not have to be a hardcore science driven. Science is an important part of genetic counseling. But I was a cultural anthropology major, and I actually almost left the healthcare field because I felt like, well, I don't fit in with other, all of the pre-med students. They don't seem to fit me, my personality. I'm more social. Not that they're not social, but I want to have more communication and get those stories. And I actually almost left, and there was a professor that told me when I told her, I think I'm leaving the pre-health field. And she said, Tawana, don't leave the pre-health field. They need more people like you. And so for people out there who are thinking you have to be a science nerd, that's not true. You just need to know the basics of science and be really good at genetics, but that's what these programs are there for, to help you get there.
How about you,
Absolutely.
Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that too, Tawana. Like I said, came from the psychology side. I thought I was going to be researching neurotransmitters. So I'm a little nerdy, but it wasn't from the science side per se. But yes, I think, people have many different backgrounds coming into this field, and that only enriches, what we can bring, as a field out to the people in healthcare. And so I think, programs are oftentimes looking for people who are curious and, excited about learning new things. Like, it's more about some of those qualities, I think, than like what you've done necessarily in the past. Obviously, there are prerequisites, for considering in both, psychology and biology, but, many paths to genetic counseling.
Wow. So we want you to put your questions in the chat. This is your moment. If you've been watching SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters, every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org, we're talking about genetic counseling. Put your questions in the chat. Eureka, I see you. You have an MS in psychology and then return to graduate study for genetic counseling. So I love that. There's some mentors in the chat. We got some people, some fans, some resources for you. And she has put a number of links. I'm going to invite her to put those again and repost them. But some of the links for GCs. So let us talk a little bit about the actual counseling experience. Are people afraid? Should they be afraid? And what is a genetic counseling experience like when you go in there? What happens during that encounter? Tawana, I'm going to have you start.
Yeah, no, don't be afraid of a genetic counseling appointment. I have a lot of patients who come in and they're usually really nervous. I like to say the reason we have counseling, I guess, attached to us in addition to being, genetics focus is a lot of genetic counselors are brilliant. I call it our superpower at helping patients to be at ease during those sessions, right? That's where the counseling comes in, because you are coming to us with a big concern. You may be affected yourself. You may have been through family members who have passed because of a condition and you're worried, and that is completely understandable. But remember that the goal of genetic counseling, especially when you get there before a diagnosis, is prevention, right? Early detection, that there is something that you can do. There may be help you to not have to go through the same course of someone else that you may have seen. And so I would say don't be afraid of a genetic counseling appointment. My sessions are usually around 45 minutes. Some genetic counselors are 30, some are an hour, just depends. And you come in, we take your personal history, your family history, we assess that family history, personal history, and then decide, okay, we talk to you about risks and benefits of testing, and then help you decide what the best choice is for genetic testing. And so no one's forcing you to do anything. There's no pressure at all.
Laura, I want you to talk next. Were you afraid when you went to your first genetic counseling session? I mean, did you, how did you feel and how was that session for you? And then Kelly, I'm going to follow it up with you on sort of the sensitivity training and how do we teach people how to be real people in these sessions and not be, automatic. So Laura, I want you to go first.
Yeah, so my first introduction was after my diagnosis, and this was the next step, and I was like, okay. There were some forms to fill out, and so like those forms about your family history are important, but like I didn't have all the answers. My dad, my parents had me late. My dad was born in 1915, so like my grandmother was born in like 1890. So I didn't have all the answers, and I felt, at first a lot of pressure to like it was a test, like I had to fill out everything and know everything. But the counselor made it clear that I didn't have to know everything. Did the best I could at answering those pre-questions, and don't let that, intimidate you. And a lot of people, you don't know what your family health history is for whatever reason. You're adopted, or your parent has passed away, or haven't told you, what that history is, or you just don't know that side of the family. So the counselor made it say it was, okay, and put me at ease. And I put down what I could, and then, the important thing was, basically it was like, I can't remember whether it's blood or saliva, but it's super easy to just give one of those two. It's not like someone's taking out a chunk of you like a biopsy. But on the genetic side, it's super easy to get that done.
Wow.
And then get the results and have the conversation. You do get nervous when you get the results, right before you get the results, because you're not sure. But it wasn't. It was kind of anxiety provoking because I didn't know. But going in, the counselor makes all the difference. The way that she or he sits down and approaches it. And I wish I
Kelly,
had somebody like.
I love it. Kelly, the counselor makes all the difference. Talk to us about that difference and some of the training that happens and what prepares these graduates for sort of the dynamic landscape of genetic counseling. How do you teach people to be real people and bring their scientific knowledge and convey all the stuff that we know about genes and genomes? And talk to us a little bit more about the personal side of the training.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that's the unique nature of this career in so many ways. Is because we do have that balanced breadth of the scientific, background, and so we're taking the classes right there, with the genetics PhDs, right? But we're also taking the classes with the psychology, clinical psychologists, and making sure that we're doing the training to understand, how to really infuse that type of information with an empathetic lens, right? I always think about it, and especially since joining Sarah Lawrence College, they are really focused on the humanity, of the individual, and thinking about really how do you honor that individual's experiences and infuse that into their care. That's kind of what a genetic counselor can really do, is they can give you that information that you need, but you're also it's a two-way street. They're also asking you very sensitive information at times, and it's not a test, like Laura said, that's not the goal, right? But that helps to inform that discussion, and so it's not like a one-way street where you're just getting information, but it's really saying, okay, given what you've told me, how would you feel about thinking about this type of testing or this type of path? What are some of those, maybe psychological challenges that could come if a test result came back positive or if it came back negative? And, positive meaning, we have a particular gene of interest, that we know something to do with, and negative meaning that we don't necessarily have a particular gene of interest that we can target, for future care. So I think that training is really important. And a lot of the training too is through those hospital experiences and those, kind of clinical program experiences too. As Tawana was saying, you had kind of, a couple different hospitals that you had traveled with and shadowed with. And a lot of our training is very hands-on, especially in the second year. Where we're going out into the hospitals, working side by side with genetic counselors and learning really how to perform that session in a way that's very patient-centered.
And lastly, what do you all say to folks who, and I see your myth in the chat, Eureka, which is that they're going to use my genes or my material, or that it's not protected, or somehow genetic counseling isn't safe. Can you tell us about some of the safeguards that are in place and ways that people are protected from unfair use of their genetic information?
Yeah, there's a big consent process, that a person would go through when they're considering genetic testing. And it's not a necessity. For many people, it is a choice, whether they want to go through that test or not, right? But if you choose to move forward with genetic testing, there's a consent process about, what they can do with your sample. As Eureka mentioned in the chat, there are also laws to protect the privacy of your health information, and making sure that can't be used against you when you're going out for employment or health insurance. So Tawana, I know you probably have more to add given your clinical experience.
I would just say I get this question a lot too. And I'd say the same thing. First and foremost, no one is forcing you to do the genetic testing. We go through the pros and cons, what information is going to be used. That's another big part of genetic counseling is we have a big part of a genetic counseling session is consenting an individual to do this testing. What genes are you interested in? Which genes are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with us testing this many? I also always tell my patients, I actually go through the lab consent form with them. I might not be like every other genetic counselor. I might be a little excessive about it, but I do take consent seriously. And I make sure to point out the area was like, we will destroy this sample within 60 days, which I've actually called labs on behalf of worried patients, and a few of them have confirmed it's 30 days. So they do destroy that sample. There's no cloning going on or anything like that. But there are laws in place that are going to protect your information. You've got HIPAA, you've got GINA. There are many laws that are there to protect anyone who does genetic testing.
And can you tell us just about the commercial types of testing? So, there's Color, there's 23andMe, there's all these different companies. What should people know, and what should they be aware of? What should they watch out for if they're thinking about doing this sort of testing at home?
I'll go ahead straight and say that's different. First off, if you're going to be doing a direct to consumer test, which, this is an age where people want their information, they want to know about themselves, and that is fine, but do read those consent forms. Those companies can use your genetic information for their own research, for other purposes. There aren't as many protections in place, right? So it's a private company. And so just be aware of that when choosing to test through 23andMe or Ancestry. Also know that those health information, take it with a grain of salt. When I use it, like someone once said, some of those tests think of it as Swiss cheese, right? There's a lot of holes in between the testing that's done when you're doing direct to consumer. Whereas our genetic testing, when you're going through a genetic counselor, is going to be diagnostic, right? You can't even be called diagnostic if you don't meet certain criteria for that. So it's going to be more of a whole picture. You're not going to be missing things that are shouldn't be missed. And and so just take anything direct to consumer with a grain of salt. Do read your consent forms. You may find that it's not as protected. Your information is not as protected as if you went through a genetic counselor. Mm-hmm.
And wow. I would just add too, don't forget to talk to your family about, maybe your choice and thinking about, doing some direct to consumer, right? That's something too, where I think a lot of people are finding even other family members that maybe they didn't know they had, like through some of these aspects. So it is a family experience, when we're thinking about genetic testing. So I would say, exactly what Tawana said, plus talk to your family.
That is important. Not the best, some patients have come to me and learned information they weren't prepared for through those tests. So just be prepared for what the possibilities are, and talking to your family can help.
Wow. Okay, we're going to get ready to close out. I want you to start thinking about your last and final tips for people while we take a quick break. But this is SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters, every fourth Saturday here on blackdoctor.org. We're talking about genetics, genetic counseling, and what's in your genes and why they matter. Stay with us. Welcome back to SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters on blackdoctor.org. And we got time for just a few closing remarks. I want everybody to tell us if there's one thing you want people to take away from today's show, what would it be? I'm going to start with Kelly, and I'm going to go to Laura, and I'm going to let Tawana finish up last.
Great. Well, thank you again for having us today in this discussion about the career of genetic counseling. I would just re-say, if anyone is interested in the career of genetic counseling, reach out to a genetic counselor. We are more than happy to discuss with you and have you shadow us and get to know about the career. You can find genetic counselors at nsgc.org. Find a genetic counselor, and that's for potential patients, but also for people who are looking into the career.
I would say that we need more genetic counselors who look like me for some of the reasons that Kelly mentioned, that sensitivity, understanding our lived experience, being able to have a positive experience. So please encourage folks in your life to explore this as a career. We need more of you.
Yeah, I would say don't just assume that you don't fit a mold, right? That you are not good enough or not capable of being a genetic counselor because of you are more of a social science individual, or you are not as strong in the sciences. If this is a career you're interested in, then pursue it and don't back down, right? Don't be afraid. Reach out to genetic counselors. And my experience is if you can find a mentor, a genetic counseling mentor, it helps us grow as people to mentor you. So be open to that. I just had my first mentee, and it was one of the greatest experiences to help her to grow and become a genetic counselor and answer her questions, her concerns. And so anyone can do that. So search for a mentor. I know I can say Texas Society of Genetic Counselors has a mentorship program, and you don't have to be from Texas in order to be part of that mentorship program. But I'm sure that I think NSGC might as well. But you can find a mentor. If you're nervous and you just want some information, reach out to genetic counselors. We're always willing to help.
There it is. Reach out, find a mentor. Don't be afraid. Talk to your family history. These are the gems and the pearls that we're hearing today. And we want to thank you for watching SOS, Soul Filling Our Sisters, every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org. We're so thankful to our sponsors, to Hologic, High Impact Partners. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this information to you. Find a counselor at nsgc.org. Go visit Sarah Lawrence College. We want you also to register, become a member of Touch for Life, and join the Black Genes Matter movement. Because why? What's in your genes matters. We will see you next month and every fourth Saturday on blackdoctor.org for Soul Filling Our Sisters. Until next time, keep your cup full.